Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Daily Skills Clinic with me, Phil. We are covering vocabulary for overviews for academic task 1 this week. So before we start, just a couple of things I want to clarify. Remember, the Daily Skills Clinics are not mandatory, so you should focus on the course first. The purpose of these is to revise different aspects of the course, provide you with some practice, and get some global feedback. Obviously, you need to complete the course first before you can revise it. So once you have completed the course, by all means, join us here. You will be receiving global feedback next Tuesday for this Daily Skills Clinic. You'll be able to find the link under this video next Tuesday. The benefits for you are that you can use global feedback to analyze your own work and overcome your weaknesses. Remember, these are not an opportunity for individual feedback. That is the purpose of the correction service. So if you're looking for in-depth feedback on your vocabulary, your grammar, or your overall structure, make sure you use the correction service. At the end of this video, I will post a task. What I would like you to do is post your answers in the comments under this video, and I will use that to make the global feedback for next week. So with that said, let's get on with this week's Skills Clinic. So as always, there's no need to overcomplicate your vocabulary. Please remember this: if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Okay, the most common mistake students make is trying to be overly complicated in their language. So this is really going to be a bit of a review of the previous 4 Daily Skills Clinics, because there's 4 possibilities to consider. We're particularly going to focus on dynamic overviews. So dynamic means that we are looking at an overview for a chart over time. So starting at one date and then moving on to another date. So it's a chart over time we're going to be looking at today. And we're going to be considering trends. And we're going to think, basically, there's only 4 things that can happen. It's going to increase, it's going to decrease, it's going to fluctuate, or remain stable. And we covered in depth how we can talk about all these things the last 4 Daily Skills Clinics. So if you're not 100% sure about that, if there's one in particular you want to check on, go back and have a look at previous Daily Skills Clinics for that language. So usually there's going to be a mix in the overview. Sometimes it's rare, but sometimes you'll find that everything's the same, so everything would have increased, so you may have to say which was highest over the period, but generally you're going to be looking at a mix of these. So we're going to look at the date. It's very important to decide what tense to use. Usually you're going to be writing the past simple. There might be some predictions, but generally you're looking at data that's already happened, so most of your writing is going to be in the past simple. We're going to have to decide if you're going to use the verb or noun form of work. Okay. In last month's Daily Skills Clinics, as I mentioned, I gave different ways that you can express how data increases, decreases, fluctuates, and remains stable. I gave you the noun versions and the verb versions in the present and in the past tenses. So again, if you're not 100% sure of that, go back and look at those. Remember, if we're looking at overviews, we have to focus on trends, okay, not specific data. So we're going to compare the data at the start of the period and at the end of the period. We're basically going to see what's happened. If the data is erratic, that means it moves around a lot, it doesn't show any trend, we're going to be considering that as fluctuating. So let's have a look at an example in a second. Just before we do that, a couple of bits of language for trends, which I hadn't really mentioned in the previous video. So we can say X displayed an upward trend, or you can before that, you could say, despite some fluctuations, X displayed an upward trend. So this is like a little bit of a language variation you could put in there. Usually you just write X displayed an upward trend. Y displayed a downward trend. It's very simple. Because the overview is only coming once, we really can just learn this language, and it wouldn't be considered repetitive. So you can learn X displayed an upward trend, Y displayed a downward trend. That would be fine. As I said, we're keeping it simple. The most important thing is we keep it simple. Remember, if it's something fluctuates, we cannot say if it's fluctuating, it has a fluctuating trend. That doesn't work, unfortunately. So we would just say that Z fluctuated over the period. Or V, for example, remained relatively stable. It's very rare that stable data is perfectly stable, so it's quite nice to have the adverb in there to say they remain relatively stable. Again, we can hedge our language a bit by saying despite experiencing some fluctuations. Okay, so these are some ways we can talk about the trends. Remember, if it remains stable or if it fluctuated, it's not really a trend, so we would use this language. Whereas if it's going up or going down, it's more appropriate to use the word displayed an upward trend or displayed a downward trend. I think displayed is a much better word than showed. I know a lot of people would use show in their work. I think displayed just sounds a bit better. The other thing students use a lot, X had an upward trend. Possible, but displayed just, it sounds more natural for a native speaker, so I would be using this verb to talk about trends personally. So we're going to have a look at an example here. So let's have a look at this and decide what our trends are. So the blue line here is rates of revenue. It's irrelevant what they're talking about, we're just going to talk about the trends. So we're going to look at the start of the period, we're going to look at the end of the period. We can see very clearly that rates of revenue increased, so we can say it had an upward trend. And user charges, equally, it had an upward trend, it's very clear it did. If we look at borrowings, it starts here, ends here. I would say it's obviously fluctuating, but it's also remaining fairly stable. If this went a little bit higher, if this starts going up here, down here, then I would just say it fluctuated. In this instance, I would say that this data remained relatively stable despite some fluctuations. And really the same here for grants and subsidies. Yes, there was a slight upward trend, but it pretty much remained stable. I think either saying there was a very slight upward trend despite some variation, or it remains stable, both would be considered accurate here, as it really hasn't changed much. However, if you look at rates and user charges, these are very clearly upward trends. So that's how I would look at it. The way I would write it is as follows. So it's an overview. We're going to start all our overviews with overall. Okay, so I need to find any other word. Just remember, overall is going to start our overview. So we're going to group our things together. So rates, revenue, and user charges displayed an upward trend. Okay. Then we want some kind of cohesive device because the next things we're talking about are doing something different. So on the other hand, despite some fluctuations, borrowings and grants and subsidies remain relatively stable over the period, and that would be sufficient. So your task for the week is to write an overview for the following chart. Okay, so you're looking at regional household recycling rates. So that's the blue line, that's the top line is UK, the red line is France, and the green line is Germany. Remember to look at the dates. We can see these are all past dates, so any verbs that you're going to use are going to be using the past symbol. So, like I said, that is your task for the week. I will give you global feedback on that next Tuesday. So good luck with the task. Hope everyone's well and safe. Take care for now, and goodbye.